Hey guys, it's your humble host, or Kayla if you prefer. So I'm back with another video. It's going to be a quick response to extra credits. I've not seen their stuff in a while, and I saw this video kind of being floated around, or their tweet about this said video. We're going to sit down and we're going to do our best to try to do a quick response to it, and it's cringy for me not seeing their content for a while. I was actually kind of disturbed when I watched this, so here we go.
War, playing the PvP in your World War II shooter, and all of a sudden, you're a Nazi. You didn't ask for this. You didn't choose this. Yet there it is. And it's treated no differently than playing a British soldier. This is bad on so many levels. No one should ever have a random chance of fighting for the Nazis, and we should never express that there's no meaningful difference between Nazis and Allied soldiers, or that they're functionally interchangeable.
Okay, so a few things. Number one, there's various games that drop you into unspecified roles or mystery roles. One of these games that does this is Dead by Daylight, and for those of you who don't know what Dead by Daylight is, it is pretty much one murderer versus survivors, and there is 9 to 10 different types of murderers that pretty much stick you on a meat hook and sacrifice you to a spider god thingy. I'm not saying the game is good or bad, but again, when you are doing a campaign and you go to join said campaign, you are randomly popped in, or you are randomly chosen when you start said campaign with a bunch of mystery people online. So in regards to having Nazi soldiers being the equivalent to a British soldier, technically they are. They're both in the army fighting for the country's ideals and their country itself. Now, something to remember when it comes to German soldiers or Nazi German soldiers back then, if you remember very quickly, how the German children were brought up. They were indoctrinated, brainwashed, and a lot of them were bred to be in the army, and they only could have particular names, none of them of Jewish descent or Jewish origin. And also, if the children got sick, they had a certain time to get better, or they're taken away from the parents. So German soldiers were pretty much indoctrinated kids that grew up to be indoctrinated adults. They were still humans. I'm not advocating saying Nazis were good. What they did was completely horrible. But yeah, you have two different perspectives, two different soldiers, or two different countries. I don't see anything wrong with that.
And before anyone equivocates and says not all German soldiers in World War II were Nazis, if they were wearing the swastika and are functioning as an arm of the Nazi government, then unless the game goes out of its way to tell you specifically that your particular character is not a Nazi, then they're a Nazi. In that multiplayer shooter, when it switched you to the German side, did it go out of its way to tell you that the person you're playing was pressed into service under threat of their life? Yeah, that's a big ol' nope.
Okay, so something else to point out too is because you're bringing up the soldier being oppressed or kind of bench pressed into the army, forced to fight for his country and his country's ideals, even though he may not agree with them. A lot of games do what's called a nuance and mystery. So when they drop you into a perspective or role of character and they don't explain what's going on, they just drop you into a mess up situation. It's kind of part of the game to slowly reveal what is going on the more the player progresses. It doesn't do any good to the story, the gameplay, or the character development if the player already knows everything that's going to happen and already knows the full situation. Again, that's part of the mystery and nuance of just suddenly being thrown into a character's role without having any idea what is going on. Mini games do this, again, there's nothing wrong with it.
Oh, and on a similar note, let's please stop forcing people to play as terrorists as well. There you are, playing your modern shooter, and all of a sudden you're a terrorist. You didn't ask for this, you didn't choose this, and yet, second verse, same as the first. There it is. I mean, that's literally the name of your side in the game. We can do better than this. Even if you put aside all of the people who have had traumatic experiences with these groups, who have lost loved ones to terrorists, or who have had generations of their families wiped out by Nazis, no one should have to put on the costume of an ideology they find abhorrent without actually opting into it in your game.
Okay, so again, let me point out a few things. You have games like let's talk about trauma victims for just a second. It would be of war, certain ideologies, freaking domestic violence, rape, alcoholism, gang activity. You have games that portray those types of things. Whether or not the character opts in and out of them at random or of their own free choosing, but you just want to focus on Nazis. You don't want to focus on games that portray you as a murderer, a gang member, someone who has an alcohol problem and is possibly abusing their spouse or children, or you do have games that to where you're a player that goes on raping people. There are legit games like that. But we're not going to talk about any of those. We're just going to talk about Nazis. How dare you give a character a Nazi uniform? And also, is it better for you, for the character, or for the game player to knowingly opt into something like that? That makes it better?
And by making people do so, we get them to stop thinking about it, to stop thinking of the meaning behind these things. We normalize them. We make them just window dressing for entertainment. Those uniforms, those symbols, become things that no longer inherently revolt us. They reduce our visceral reaction to seeing the embodiment of these ideologies. Now, does this make us totally ignore the history that comes with them? No.
The same could be said again for domestic abusers, alcoholics, gang members, murderers, rapists. The list goes on. Creepers. So, I mean, heck, even pedophiles. There's games that have all sorts of things in them that desensitize the masses to them because they're constantly seeing in their video games. Now, again, I'm not for censoring everything, for keeping people in bubbles, but to an extent, I do believe that there are certain things in media that shouldn't be in there because it does put things in people's heads. But again, when there's a difference between reality, there's a difference between somebody who's of a sound mind going, hey, you know what, this isn't real. Oh, hey, I don't want to see this, so I can not buy this or turn this off or whatever, versus somebody who is brainwashed by it. So, again, we're just going to focus on Nazis.
But for some people, it moves them from the territory of revolting to just edgy. It makes scrawling a swastika on something change from unthinkable to just dangerous. It means you might not take iron crosses all over a website as a warning sign that you should immediately leave, and if you don't leave, you might start reading and buying into hateful ideas there. It seems like such a small and simple thing, but it's things like this that erode our safeguards against dangers we sacrifice so much to fight.
So, how dare people read up on past beliefs, philosophies, or ideologies to understand how they impacted society, how they impacted people of that society, countries, economic growth, things like that? How dare people read up on that stuff in general? You're not talking about how it's presented, you're not talking about in what context it's presented, you're just talking about people reading up on it in general. And regards to people being edgy or having a website that has iron crosses everywhere or a swastika, let me bring up websites like 4chan and 8chan. Don't be trolls. There are people who go out of their way to get a reaction out of people. I'm not saying it's right, but again, there are these people, and if you just ignore them, they do go quiet and they move on. But again, you're not talking about presentation. You're focusing on the fact that there is a Nazi uniform in a video game, and that's what bothers you, or Nazi symbols, or how dare they make Nazis equivalent to other human beings when they were indoctrinated human beings. So, yeah.
By the time you've played 100 hours of being a Nazi, their voice stabs become memes and in-jokes with your friends. By the 1000th time you've respawned as a terrorist, you're either celebrating them or making fun of them, neither of which helps the global crisis we have that takes thousands of lives every year. So what do? That's easy. Don't make them morally equivalent. Don't make there be no in-game moral difference between your Nazis and your allies, between your terrorists and your counter-terrorist squads. Frame PvP as a training exercise. Or simply take one of your non-odious sides and recolor them so that it's red versus blue.
How about not? How about you just let people make games how they want to express them? Again, I get the point. If you were actually making this point of having certain things in media or in video games in general and use them as entertainment dressing, as you wanted to put it, but you're not making that argument. You're just focusing solely on Nazis and how dare video games give you two different perspectives of a conflict that happened so many years ago. Um, again, Nazis bad. Nazis are still everywhere, killing people. Also, what do you define as a terrorist? Because you didn't go into that either. You just kind of threw that in there. There was no reference or context for what you deemed as a terrorist. I don't think you would touch that one with a 9-foot pole, now would you?
Rather than Axis versus Allies. A good example of a game that does this is Rainbow Six Siege. All of your bomb diffusion and hostage rescue multiplayer with no normalizing terrorists. In fact, by having all of the characters as counter-terrorists, training for a possible threat, it highlights how real and present of a threat that is. And if you decide that you need to have both sides be playable, don't make them interchangeable.
Why? Why can't you show both sides of a conflict and do so properly? And also, what do you define as a terrorist? There are extra credits. Like, you don't get, I notice you have very specific uniforms and bombs. So you equate putting on bombs as terrorism. Again, you give no context as to what a terrorist is. Again, you guys didn't touch that with a 9-foot pole, and I know exactly why.
Don't have players randomly spawn in as one or the other. Allow players to choose which side they're on. Now, of course, this has all sorts of in-game problems, such as creating shorter wait times for fascists, but you know what? Those wait times could be artificially extended if it meant players had an active choice in what teams they would represent if you're saying we need people playing Nazis in our games. And if you're going to say, but we need it for historical reasons, then
Okay, so let me touch upon the game mechanics. There are games where they let you opt in for what side you want to play. Now, that has proven time and time again to be quite faulty, and then you're wanting to tack on more time because people opt in to play a team that obviously has less players to it and is seen as a hateful side because of the symbols that they're wearing. So you want to make that mechanic even worse and possibly stall campaigns or make campaigns not really playable. So you want to solve the problem by making it worse because this side wears particular symbols or has a particular skin. Because Nazis. I know that joke is going to get real old, but
your game better actually be historical. You can't really just hide behind the fact you called your desert map El Alamein and say, but it's historical. If that were the case, you need your PvP to at least represent real historical events and be a realistic take on those battles. Once you make both sides balanced, it's also no longer historical. And you can't really say that you need Nazis anymore for historical accuracy. Oh, and once you let players get cool weapons that weren't actually at that particular battleground, it's also no longer historically accurate. And
so how dare video games use historical figures, historical references, historical places, historical symbols, and add modern technology, whether it be firearms, settings, buildings, whatever? How dare they take historical stuff and combine them with modern day technology or other things for players to enjoy and get some knowledge of? Like, they can't do that because it's not everything. If you use a what they're saying, guys, if you use anything from history, Nazis, it has to be full dead on historically accurate 100%. You can't put any type of fiction to it because then it desensitizes people to it or numbs them or makes them jaded to what happened back then. Nazis.
you can't declare that your game will suffer if you don't put players in the jackboots of the Third Reich. And once your map is something carefully designed to have good gameplay by a team in a room in San Francisco or LA, and it's not a faithful reconstruction of the actual places the historical events occurred in, You can no longer say we need to have players take up arms in service of terror or hate.
Okay, so did you notice that the reference to Silicon Valley? What? Why? That when I watched this, I was actually thrown off guard because it's like that is the only. But they were very specific with where certain games were made. Like if you don't have a game that's made here and here with historical accuracy in places, why not reference other video game companies or developers? Like it seems like they're focusing on a particular game. We saw the screenshot, and I don't play really first person shooters or a lot of those army based games, so I have no idea what the hell they're referencing. But they seem to be picking on a certain game, but they don't want to name it, I guess, to give it credence or attention or whatever the case may be. But again, the Silicon Valley reference is weird. For any of you who don't know why I keep saying that it's weird, is because you have companies like Facebook, Twitter, I believe Patreon, Google. That area is a big plethora for censorship, and they go out of their way to censor people who go outside the narrative or present counter philosophies, ways of thinking, whether it be political or just in general. So again, the reference to Silicon Valley is actually a little bit worrying here because you could reference like so many other game developers and producers, but you chose very specific ones out of California, and to me, that is just weird. Let's continue.
And look, we're not saying we can't have games about World War II or about terrorism. We're not even saying we shouldn't make games where you play as a Nazi or a terrorist. But what we are saying is that the fact that you're playing as a Nazi or a terrorist in a game has to mean something. And it can't just be a skin. It can't be something that a game randomly drops you into. And really, if we are saying anything in this episode, it's this: games can do better. And in this particular case, it's not even that hard to do better. And it's no more costly to do better. All it requires is that we in the game industry be cognizant of the world around us and what these symbols we're drawing on mean. That we
Okay, so I'm gonna stop it here. Because overall your argument sucks. There are many types of military strategy games where you have games that let you play all sorts of types of armies. It's not just the Nazis. You guys want to focus on the Nazis because it is a hot thing to beat on right now in regards to punch a Nazi, anti-fascist, down with the neo-Nazis, because like they have a pinned comment here clarifying some of the things that they meant. And they even reference we live in a time where neo-Nazis exist and they seem to have increasingly found a home in gaming communities. If you guys want to read the full comment, go ahead. I'm not going to go into it, but it is there. And touch upon that one specific thing because this goes back to another argument I had. It was a completely different topic, but the argument still applies. Just because you have certain people invade certain things or certain areas or whatever it may be does not mean that you should go out of your way to freaking hide information or references to said information or historical or past events. The paranoia is ridiculous. You have so-called neo-Nazis, like the freaking scrawny white guy wannabes. That's what it is, because usually you have neo-Nazis tied in with the alt-right, and for those of you who haven't read up on the alt-right, they legitimately advocate for white nationalism, white anthem. It's stupid. And I've said on Twitter, I will never, ever, ever give those morons a platform because my family's mixed. Whether blood or by marriage, I no. I've talked about on this channel having different subcultures, how America's become a melting pot. I'm for legal immigration, so neo Nazis, they are nothing. They are nothing compared to actual Nazis that took over and freaking murdered in mass droves Jewish people, LGBT people, anybody who's considered disabled or dysfunctional to German society back then. And also there was another, because we talked about this on my stream, another race of people that was also thrown into the Holocaust camps, the concentration camps. So again, you guys just want to focus on Nazis. And also, the two references they made to specific locations in California for game development, off the top of my head, I don't know what those game developers are, so if you guys do, put them in the comment section. Because the fact that they made a video virtue signaling, um, Nazis bad, and then two very specific locations in Silicon Valley, no less, kind of tells me somebody either sponsored the video or I don't know. It's a major red flag, and they're picking on a certain game because they're very particular about jackboots. They showed a screenshot. Again, I don't follow or play a lot of first-person shooters or army games, so I have no idea what the hell they're referencing. But they are picking on a certain game from the looks of it, one or two games. But anyway, if you guys know, let me know in the comment section below. As you guys see, this video got ratio bombed, and I just wanted to do a response to it because, holy heck, I had not sit down to these guys for a while, and to come across a video like this, I've never seen anything like this come out of them before. And they do talk about how they do historical references when it comes to video games, which is fine. And like, I love this line here, but then our content may not be for you, cause thinking hard about games is kind of our shtick. That's kind of implying that people don't play video games, that people who play video games don't really think about what they're playing, which is not true, like, at all. But anyway, that's enough of my prattling. Give me your thoughts below. What do you guys think, about certain things being in video games or just being in the media in general? Because, like, I listed off quite a few different things that are seen as decentralizing people or numbing them or making them jaded. So give me your thoughts below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.